Okay, now we are streaming on the channel. Lekker. Alright, we're live on my channel. Evening, everyone. For those that are just popping in now, we haven't got any viewers on yet, but we'll just start. So this evening we have Colyn online, and from Skidmarks, Briekmerke. Interesting individual who recently this week came under fire. Tell us a little bit about the Human Rights Commission hoo-ha about your anti-LGBTQ stance.
I'm not I'm not so sure what the hell is going on. The only information that I have is that some guy or girl or thing or what has laid a complaint at the Human Rights Council. And someone sent me a message and said the way the process works is that the Human Rights Council will now take a look at the video that they are complaining about and then see if I have actually singled out a person or what.
I mean, like, I've
So
watched.
that is where we are standing, Liam. I'm really not going to spend my time worrying about it or thinking about it. I haven't said anything that is not common sense. And for me, the reality is that we have a major issue with that movement. They are making demands on our society and specifically on our children that is totally uncalled for and actually satanic.
Yeah, it definitely is a very toxic movement. Um, and I actually had an interesting conversation this week with Kurt from Boer Media, because this week we did an interview, and he says to me, like, it seems this day there's like identity politics. There's a lot of identity politics, and if you see it, like, when there's times that society is degraded and broken down, people often will group together in little cliques, and either it's back to traditional culture or new ideas. And a lot of these people that are lost in this LGBTQ stuff seem to be people that have trauma in their life and just don't are so disconnected from their culture that they end up falling for this ideas.
Well, I've always been of the opinion that uh, one of the one of the main missions of my famous triple X is to destroy, first of all, destroy culture. And to destroy culture, they start by destroying the family, the base family. They do the destruction there. And once the children is basically roaming free with no cultural connections and parental discipline and things like that, they are like lost, they're like lost birds, and they don't know where they belong. They don't know where to group. They don't know where to nest. They know nothing. They just, they just floating, and that makes them easy targets for all kinds of propaganda to infect their minds and make them, uh, what is the correct word? It's easy to manipulate them. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, easily manipulatable. Yeah, if I think back on my days when I was younger, I was a lot more liberal. Raised in a household that was really centrist, um, and like, my grandfather's an out and out Anglo liberal, and then my dad is a little more conservative. So with that balance up, in my younger days, I saw how a disconnect from a very strong conservative culture, how it had its effect on the way I presented myself in society. But the minute I found a connection to culture, to my roots, to heritage, to who I really was, I could say personally, shifted me in the right direction. I think if I never found my roots in my culture as a Boer, I probably would have been one of those washed up wokey liberals in modern culture.
It's interesting for you to say that. In my eyes, you're a young guy, and I can actually understand that something like that. You know, if I think back about my varsity days in the 70s, in those years, I would have been considered actually liberal because of the way that I see society and the way that I see humanity. And I was deeply involved in philosophy and things like that. And that makes you think a lot about things. And we used to discuss it around the fires there in the fountains or in the coffee rooms in the varsity hostels, and had discussions like that. That was for the time actually very liberal. And I've always said the thing that changed a lot in the white society was the elite class. They sent their children overseas to study and get degrees. And those youngsters, they were exposed to the more liberal America and European, mostly English varsities and so forth. And by the mid-70s, many of those youngsters started returning to South Africa. And I mean, we didn't have free television and things like that. The press was enormously controlled and censored and so forth. And all of a sudden, you have in the, let me say, the age group between around about 18 and 25, you had people there that had international experience. And they talked a lot and we talked a lot among us and ourselves. And we, the South Africans, started to realize that we were actually very firmly controlled by a government structure that was, you know, it's maybe dangerous to say it, but was very almost, you know, super socialist in their mindset. And that started a movement in the South Africans, because it was by around about, I think about 1975, around about there, when Colyn and his truck started with in conscription and all of that, you know. And so those are the days that I grew up with and matured under those conditions. And then I started working for myself. I had to work for the government for a few years because I had to work back my bursaries and so forth. Then I started, my first business I had was a photographic studio next to the Cinerama Theatre there in Pretoria. The place was called Photovision. And I worked from that little studio, and it was, you know, and in that little complex that was there was a graphics designer and there was 3 other photographers. And I think as a society there, we could be viewed as fairly liberal progressive, because it's artsy shit and all of that. And then in the early 80s, I was diagnosed with cancer, and that brought a major mind shift for me. I was sitting and I was looking at the situation and I'm looking at myself and I think, here I am, I feel fit, I feel strong, I feel healthy. There's a fucking thing in me that is busy eating me. So that was a major, let's call it a mind fuck to get over. And then I went for the operations and they removed all of the cancer. And was luckily it was caught early. And but that created a major mind shift for me. And my wife was at that stage. She was a lecturer at the college of nursing at the nursing college, and she had a good career. And so, but I just couldn't take how I felt anymore because that situation where the winter comes and the trees die and all the leaves are off and everything goes grey and brown and all of that. That made me very depressed to see that. And I just wanted to get away from it. And my I was into the computer programming at that stage and so forth. And I was actually a trailblazer in many aspects. And I was one of the first qualified ACPAC accounting software installers in Africa. At that stage, started the business in Newcastle, mining and industrial supplying. And after the operation, I went down to him and I spent some time there and I started helping him. And I started computerizing his stock system and so. And after about a month, I decided I'm going to move because the business was growing fast and so forth. And then it was a little bit of a fuck up with my wife. She was not keen to go and all of that. But in any case, the story, we moved to Natal and the business grew like hell. And I'm not going to go into the details of the business as such. Then at a point, at that stage, South Africa was severely hammered by sanctions. And politicians came to us and said, listen, they need some assistance with a specific product because the farmers are paying too much for it, but they can help to get the raw materials into the country if they can find someone that can process the shit. And me and my brother went into a mission to get a plant, found a plant, and we were in the final stages of setting that production plant up. And the shit hit us. And we got financially absolutely wiped out because Triple X was on our fucking case. Like, those years I didn't understand. But now recently, about 3 months ago, someone contacted me. And he spoke to me about that fuck up. And he said to me, he was in the room when the hook noses visited the government and told them, we're going to wipe those two turkeys out. Yeah. We're not going to allow them to do what they are planning. And because the thing that worried me, not worried me, but always intrigued me was, I mean, I took them to court in person 17 times in Pietermaritzburg, in the Supreme Court, and then I also did our appeal case in Bloemfontein, all in person. And we couldn't get any assistance from the Department of Justice because although it was clear that there was a movable lot of corruption going on, and I could never understand that. Well, you must understand, fuck, man, in the area where I was, we used to bribe with all those fucking hobnobs, big fuckers of those years. I mean, I was around braai fires with de Klerk and all that. And so after that fiasco, you must understand, I came out of it, apart from my whole business empire being fucking destroyed, I was also sequestrated in my personal capacity, which meant that for 10 years I was basically cut from the economic environment.
They stuffed you one time straight.
And, okay, I used some proxies and so forth, and I moved away from Natal because it was unbearable to be there, because everywhere they were on us. And I started a new life here in the Lowveld. And I built my life back, and that was... I didn't want to know anything about fucking politics. Fuck all. Nux. I don't want to see a politician. I don't want to hear a politician. Fuck all. Nux. Because at that stage I realized, okay, we were fucking screwed with the referendum. We were screwed by fucking false fuckers and
lying, cheating
I mean,
bastards.
it was a serious fucking knock that I took, man. One day I'm a multimillionaire, the next day I'm fucking got the clothes on my back. And what was making me more angry is the high amounts of corruption that was involved in the whole thing. But in any case, that's behind it. And so I was not really interested in politics at all. I didn't want to fucking know anything about politics. Until, look, if I say fuck all with politics, I voted every time. Every election I voted. And until around about the time when the Russians went into Ukraine. At that stage, I'm semi-retired and I'm sitting here and I'm watching the news. And there's an Afrikaans channel, that Nuuspot channel, and I was watching the thing every day. And then I got to a point and I realized, but this fucking oak is always giving one side. He's driving a narrative. And I started engaging him. And he very quickly turned quite fucking nasty.
As usual,
And then,
criticism.
And then I made a fucking stupid tweet on Twitter about Zelensky and Ukraine and so forth. I mean, obviously I was against the Russians. That is how I was brought up. The rooi gevaarkak, you know. But, all right. That was... I made that tweet and a lady, contacted me in a private message. Farmer, and they live in the northwest from what I can deduct. She said to me, listen, I think you should go and read up on the Donbass. At that stage, I didn't even know there's a place like the fucking Donbass, man. I was there for 6 months. I'm a freelance journalist. I was there for 6 months. I came back. And when I came back to South Africa, I found that none of the media here wanted to publish any of my stories. I couldn't get published at all. Go and investigate that. And Liam, that was a Moorse culture shock for me. I started reading and digging. And by the second day, I realized, fuck, we've been lied to like hell. And the more I read and the more contacts I made and the more I started talking, because I'm quite a fucking intense guy. When I take a thing, I don't let it go. And by the third day, I was an emotional wreck, because this was more of a mental shock to me to realize my life has been a fucking lie. And, okay. I then confronted the guy again on the spot, and I said to him, you must stop this one-sided fucker reporting. Give the people both sides. Give the people both sides of the bloody story. You are claiming to be a news outlet. So at least give us both sides of the damn story that we can make our own minds up. But what you are doing is you're pushing a fucking narrative and you expect everybody to believe you. And he blocked me. He blocked me on WhatsApp and he blocked. You know what the crazy thing is? I'm talking to my older son. I said to him, listen, maybe you should consider running some adverts for your business on this channel. They've got a good viewing numbers and so forth. And he's Afrikaans out, man. And I gave my son Isaac's cell number. But when I looked the number up and I checked and I see, fuck, the guy has blocked me on WhatsApp. And I said to my son, listen, ek kan nou nie vir jou enige voorbrand doen of niks nie, want hy het my nou geblok, maar kontak hom direk, hier sy nommer. And his words to me was, pa, as hy jou geblok het, fok hom op, man, dan sal ek moes nou nie by hom wil adverteer nie.
Point of principle.
Well, okay. So ek, okay, that's it. And I was fucking angry. And I got up from my chair. And I walked. You must understand one thing. I am a guy that is really intently aware of the spiritual realm. For me, the spiritual world is a real place like what me and you are sitting here. It's not some illusion. I walked to the kitchen to make me a cup of coffee, but I was fuming. And as I poured the hot water into the cup, I got a notice. Jy moet nou praat. And I stood and I stared through the window for a while and I thought, okay. But I have learned through my life, I don't ignore things like that. Came back, I sat down behind the desk and I started my fucking channel. And initially, I just started giving the other side of the whole Ukraine thing. And I got a hell of a lot of opposition. I got a lot of uitkakke, you can imagine, you know, because I'm talking things here that everybody else, they don't believe in it. They think it is stories. I mean, it's even people today, as me and you are talking. Fuck, this morning I get a bloody comment on one of my videos. Putin het Ukraine binnengeval. Hy is die attacker. What the fuck are you talking about?
What they forget is there's another side to it. As far as I understand, is when NATO was formed, Russia wanted to join NATO, but then they had just the Soviet Union had collapsed, and it was now just formed the Russian Federation. But America was like, no, because they don't want another competing superpower.
That's not totally correct. Huh? That's not totally correct. Huh?
Is it?
NATO was formed in a response to the Warsaw Pact, but Russia showed interest to join NATO very recently. I think it was somewhere in 20, 25 or 27, somewhere there. That's when they wanted to join NATO because they said, look, but the bloody problem with NATO, there was a meeting and Putin was at the meeting where just at the, actually not, he was not, but it was with Gorbachev. And they gave Gorbachev, I think that was in 1993, they gave Gorbachev this assurance that NATO will not move east. And unfortunately, that was never documented, Liam. And the Americans did what they did. You see, I've done Skidmarks on how NATO expanded and the expansion of NATO. But about 6 months ago, I can't remember if it was a French guy or a German guy, did an article. He was in the room when that assurance was given to Gorbachev. He was in the room. And he said, this was said at that and that, and he gave all the stories. So they gave Russia the assurance they will not move 1 inch east.
And
And
what
look
happened?
where they are today.
More countries joining, and I think that's one of the things that sparked the war with the Ukraine. Is like they warned them. They said, "Listen, don't do this." But now there was like a whole lot of the scandals around Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, going into Ukraine. His laptop information, all that stuff that they brought out. That they realized how much the West had been investing into Ukraine being on Russia's borders. And I mean, if you're gonna push someone into a corner, eventually they're going to have to decide what to do. And Russia is just retaliating and responding to the threats that have been made to them. I think Donald Trump put it in a good way. Like he says, this could have all been avoided if the West had the balls to go and sit around the table with Putin and discuss, instead of constantly sitting across the borders and just showing him middle finger the whole time from the other side of the border.
Yeah. You see, now, I don't know if you listened to Putin's speech that he made at SPIEF 2024 now in St. Petersburg. There was a hell of a bloody discussion that he had. Originally, the planners of the discussion, because he was facing the international press, and they originally wanted it to be a Q&A. And Putin said, no. I'm not going to do a Q&A. We're going to sit around the table and we're going to discuss current affairs. All of us are going to give our opinions and how we see things. It's going to be a discussion, not a Q&A. And true to tradition, Putin is a master at those things. And one of the things that he said that the West should actually take very serious notice of was when they talked about the fact that some Western countries has now given Ukraine permission to use their weapons into Russia. And Putin said, we will handle that as it happens. They're already doing it. But what you must now understand, we are now considering, because these people are actually fighting a proxy war against us now. It's no more a proxy war in the Ukraine. They are now targeting Russia. Now, what we can now consider, and I have already given out some guidelines on it, we are going to arm the enemies of NATO.
Interesting.
Now, can you imagine that?
If
If
ever,
they arm the Middle Eastern operators that are fighting against basically America with decent long distance weapons, not one single military base of America is going to be safe in the Middle East. Not one.
yeah, that's going to be disastrous. And these kind of
And Putin said, there's no difference between you giving weapons to Ukraine to attack us and we giving weapons to other groups to attack you.
it's the same thing. And I mean, just the scary part of this is the people that Russia would be arming are quite unpredictable. But the difference is, though, the people that they're arming are people who have very strong culture and are very strong on
Yeah,
their ideology, whereas the West is like
yeah,
culturally lost. So at the end of the day, when it comes to, like, they already ran polls in the United States about conscription for the military for a third world war, and most of these wokies are like, no, they're not going to do it because, you know, they've made the men of the West are so bloody feminine that the idea and the simple concept of having to pick up a rifle and fight for your country is so far-fetched for them. They just can't comprehend it. I mean, those guys get PTSD thinking of the idea of touching a rifle. That's how flippin' feminine they are. So the West is pushing themselves into a corner right now. They are committing political suicide with everything they've
for
done.
sure.
They
For sure.
taunting the big Russian bear. Okay, America, you know, was once upon a time seen as like the big brother of the world, the superpower that's strong, united. They're like a bloody chihuahua. Okay, it's yip yap yip yap, and they actually have no guns to back it up. Russia, on the other hand, is the calm, quiet bear sitting there in the corner, and they've had their bad history. They've had the Soviet Union, that was a nightmare, but they are quite unified as a people. One thing I've noticed about Russian people, and especially the Russian Christians, as I've recently in the last year become Russian Orthodox, and the Russian community sticks together. There's that sense of that moral unity, and they are hardened people. That's something that they and us as Boer share in common, is this struggles that we've been through throughout our history, and how the people have had to be hard, strong people. And you put
Well,
Western wokies against hard,
Putin
strong
mentioned
people.
exactly that. Putin referred to that exactly. And he said, if I look at the Russian nation is not afraid of what the West are threatening them with. The Russian nation realize that they're under an existential threat, and they're gonna fight. So, and he also said something interesting. He said that Russia does not need nuclear arms to fuck the West up. They can do it conventionally. So I don't know what's going to happen there. Maria Zakharova said something interesting in a clip I saw from her, and she said that she was talking to a reporter, and she said to the reporter, listen, what you guys must really try and get to your readers and listeners is that the European public need to understand that their leadership has given their sovereignty away to the Americans. And if you do not claim your sovereignty and act in your national interest, you are going to pay severely for that. And that is something that many commentators have spoken about, and many politicians have mentioned it already, the fact that the Europeans They are American lapdogs. They're not independent anymore. They don't have any independence. And I read a very interesting article, a German article, in which the guy said that the people in the West does not understand the depth to which the major European countries, has been captured by the Americans. There is some of those countries that can most probably never get out of that grip unless there's a horrific war. And so from what I see is that Europe is sitting bloody close to the fire, because Medvedev has also said that they are fully aware of that major base in Poland and in Romania, where all the Western weapons is sent there and then prepared for Ukraine and then sent to Ukraine, and also repairs on the weapons are being done there. And they know that there are specialists there that are basically running the Ukraine military. Is it because a lot of the weapons that the West is now giving to Ukraine soldiers cannot manage those weapons. They can push the button, but that's all.
They don't know how to
There
use
is
them.
Western guys sitting behind it, programming the stuff, and they depend heavily on the Western satellite information and reconnaissance and guidance and so forth. They know it.
Talking of the
And
satellites,
he,
sorry to intervene here. One thing that I liked is, Elon Musk has the Starlink system. He immediately shut it off for Ukraine and said he will not have his system used for weapons.
he didn't shut it off.
Didn't he?
The Russians are jamming the damn thing.
Ah, I see.
They are bitching like hell about it, but the Russians are jamming it. They say because this is supposed to be a civilian communication system, but we capture Ukrainian bases and we capture Ukrainian soldiers, and we know that they're using Starlink for a lot of their military operations. So, but I think the West is playing a very dangerous game. Liam, if you are just an objective analyst and you just look at facts, America is definitely, the West is not a match for Russia, Northern Korea, in China, and Iran. They're not a match for them. They can talk a lot and so forth. I listened to an American analyst the other night, and he said that the American armed forces, there are a certain level of officers in those armed forces that realize that the days of warships is over. The modern missile technology makes every warship basically a floating coffin.
There's
And
nothing can compare to that.
yeah, they cannot. And if you remember correctly, when the shit broke out in Gaza, very quickly the Americans moved 3 aircraft carriers into the Mediterranean. But once those aircraft carriers was there, when they arrived in the Mediterranean, Putin asked them, "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to scare somebody with these ships? All I can tell you," and that was his words. He said, "What I can tell you is that there are people in Gaza that don't scare easily. That's the first thing. But just to protect our bases in Syria, we are putting now MiGs on 24-hour service in the Black Sea, and they're all loaded with Kinshal missiles. It's got just over 1,000-kilometer range. So if you do something stupid to touch one of our bases, we're going to retaliate. Don't forget that. And then there was that article that came out, and they said that what the Americans must remember is China has installed on their western border a hell of a lot of ballistic missile launching systems, specifically armed for aircraft carriers. And the moment that an American aircraft carrier goes past Cyprus, they're in range of the Chinese.
Oops. What an inconvenience for them then. I mean, sitting in the Black Sea, that would include that. So.
And imagine now this. Can you remember? Just go and check. You can go and check it up. How quickly the Americans took those aircraft carriers away from the Mediterranean. They've got one there, and he's sitting somewhere on the western side of Cyprus. He doesn't get close to the Israeli point. And because that one other guy that I listened to, he said, look, what will happen in practice is the Americans are going to launch that airplanes from the aircraft carriers. And that will be the last, because those planes will not find a carrier to come back to.
Carrier will be gone, and those planes will probably be blasted out of the skies.
So I don't know. I can't understand that the people are so reckless with it, Liam. Tell me, what does it look like for you? Can you see? Have you got viewers?
Yeah, we've had viewers coming and going. We've had a couple of comments made here. Sharon Schlachter popped in, said hello, put in some comments here. She's actually a municipal councillor. So yeah, people are viewing the stream, so it's a normal thing with streams. People will come.
Question.
Is
there any questions?
There's no questions that have come in yet. I think there was just Sharon made a comment here saying, in reference to earlier when we were talking about political ideologies, and she says, I grew up in a house of mixed politics. My dad being a sap and my mother being a nat. We had interesting debates. Yes, household politics debates. Ooh, I think of my family over a Christmas dinner. My parents always tell me, the minute I get there, they say, no politics. I'm like, you talk to the guy who works in politics and you say, I can't talk about my job. Fine. Half my family is liberal, and the other half, being just my dad, myself, and my cousin and my brother, are conservative and quite nationalist. My dad has the view of the way the world is because he went to war, Angola, and I think he served a total of almost a decade. He did permanent force in the Air Force afterwards, so then he was shipped up to Angola to the air bases there, so he saw the worst of the world, and he says, my boy, the world is too fucked to be liberal.
Yeah. Listen, tell me, Liam, okay, we've been going for about 45 minutes. I think we must end the thing. What I want to ask you is, I shared that report article with you on the Vryheidsfront Plus.
Yeah, I read through that. Very interesting.
There's a few interesting statements there.
I see how they kind of try to dodge certain things, especially when it comes to the whole thing of establishing branches just for votes, and things like that, and the walkout. I spoke to some guys that were in Gauteng, and they said, yeah, they walked out to try and break the quorum so that it would be seen as an unconstitutional meeting. People that were physically there said, basically, Alberts and Mulder weren't happy with the results, so they walked out in protest because they were ousted from their positions.
I've had that information very quickly after that meeting. The thing that, and I've mentioned it a few times in my Skidmarks, is that I could not understand why was the report not released on the promised date. And it seems to me that report is still not officially released.
Yeah, there's always when this party does investigations, they always take their time and they're rather thorough. And when I mean thorough, it's like they're trying to actually find something where there is nothing. If you think about my situation, I'm still waiting for a charge sheet. I haven't heard anything. Like you saw the response you got after our interview, like, okay, that's the obvious that was stated, but there's nothing more. Any party member I speak to, it's like, oh, they're still investigating. When I speak about Gauteng, it's like, no, they're still investigating. So
All right, I ran a poll on my community page, and the question I asked was, where did you hear about the Afrikaner Accord and Section 235? And the options was Briekmerke, Vryheidsfront Plus, en ek weet niks van dit nie. 91% of the people, 91% currently voted, they heard from it on Briekmerke, and 6% says they don't know what's going on with it. So 3% heard it from the Freedom Front Plus.
yeah, that's probably.
Now, what does that tell you?
Look, if it was. Now, I've gotten a little bit more context on the Afrikaner Accord because I actually spoke to Louis Smuts from Tabok Trust, who are actually at the moment pushing it. And some interesting information there is the Accord is legally still valid. It's still valid. It can still be implemented. Now you have to go back to the drawing board with borders and stuff, but the Accord still stands and is legally valid. So
Yeah, that's the way I have it also. There's nothing wrong with the Accord. The issue will be
obviously
the borders.
Yeah,
The border will
and
be
then
the issue.
the thing is, so I like I said to you this week, that past I was with Koert from Boer Media, and he also asked me a little about the Accord in the interview he did. And you know, Boer Media did a 3-part interview with Louis Smuts. I watched it before. I went back and watched it again to understand the context of it all. But my main question always like, okay, this is something that the Freedom Front pushed and then they threw the towel in, right? Why is it not in the grondwet that this party stands to establish a Volksstaat when that was the main reason why the party was established? 2, fight for the implementation and establishment of a Volksstaat. Like, why is it not party doctrine? Why is it like not? Why does nobody actually know? Because when I joined the Freedom Front, the only thing was like, oh, self-beskikking, this is a minority party. 235 was never brought up. The Afrikaner Accord was never brought up. It's only something I learned in recent years. It baffles me. It's something that is important to us. It is our freedom and our future that we're talking about here, not some wishy-washy policy for the unitary South Africa. Like, yeah, it frustrates me.
Well, all I can say to you, Liam, from what I see of what is going on now, in my mind, I cannot see a successful working coalition, and this government of national unity is getting a lot of resistance. I've said it in one of my Skidmarks. If I look at the results of the election, you must agree that a lot of people voted along, let's call it, tribal lines.
It's
And
pretty obvious.
the only parties that was not clear in the fight on tribal lines was the DA and the ANC. Incidentally, both of them they have made many statements in which they reject anything tribalist or nationalist. So
Yeah, that's
they
going
are
to be in
then,
them.
in my mind, they are two globalist parties. Uh, there is some of the others that got a little bit of a tinge of globalism, but they did not do well because they were not clear on who are their supporters and what are they going for. And then I have said it many times that shitshot pact of Johnny, that was suicide for any small party that joined it. And I said it
I
right in the beginning.
rejected it from the beginning. I rejected that moonshot bat.
And I said that what is going to happen there is the voters of those parties are going to look at it and say, okay, these folks are going to go with the DA in any case. So the voters voted directly for the DA, so the parties lost, and a lot of their other votes went to other parties.
Like,
Uh,
I sat there with the ballot on the election day. I stood at the ballot box, looked at the ballot papers, and I basically said to myself, I looked at these. I stood there probably for about 5 minutes, thinking to myself, what the fuck now? None of these parties speak to me. Who am I supposed to vote for? And at the end of the day, I made my mark, and it was a very difficult decision. But there's so many people like my mother who, simply because of what's happened to me, she was like, okay, I'm going back to voting DA. Or my dad, he's got his things he supports. He's heavily supports Cape independence and was deeply disappointed in the referendum parties. Um, turnout and support. But most people I know were like, this at the end of the day, the moonshot pat is like, just vote DA. Then they're the big dogs there, and that's what most people did. And look at the results.
yeah.
And I mean
The DA was the only winners out of that pact.
I think the PA the PA was in the ANC alliance. They were not in the moonshot. The PA, I believe that they took a lot of coloured votes, because
Oh, yes.
Gayton McKenzie. One thing I must say I respect about Gayton McKenzie is he refuses to scapegoat whites. He says to people, there is a sell-by date for blaming others for your own failures. Like, if yes, 2 years after, something tragic, okay, blame the past, yeah, that's fine. After about 5 years, you need to have your shit together. 30 years down the line, you can't be sitting here blaming apartheid, the National Party, all of that shit. It's 30 years. Like, the National Party governed for 35 years. You've almost met the lifespan of the National Party.
Yeah, no. So I think that moonshot pact was a clever stunt that the DA pulled on the smaller parties, and the small parties fell for it. Now I see the UIM saying we're out of that now, and
Well,
uh,
where the minute the DA started.
Action SA says we're out of it, and I thought to myself, it's too late.
Action SA spoke out and rejected when the DA decided, no, we're going to do coalition with the ANC. Then Action SA was like, no way whatsoever, and they backed out, which is a good decision. They will last, because the last time there was a unitary government where the new National Party and the ANC went into coalition in '94. Look at the following elections results. How dismal the support was for the National Party, because it was seen as betrayal against their own people. Now you're cahootsing with the enemy. So what's the point of electing an opposition if they're just going to collaborate with the people you're against? It doesn't work. It was proved with the National Party and ANC coalition and it's going to be proved now with the DA ANC coalition. And any other party that comes on board to join in this coalition that is like of the opposition out of the moonshot pattern, that smaller parties, they are going to be completely irrelevant in the next elections. You'll see with local elections, any of those parties that had any clout or any positions in municipalities, they are going to lose their support, because one thing us as South Africans are good at is boycotting. We might not always come out, to support publicly and that, but boycotting, we do it well.
Well, yeah, it was an interesting chat. I thank you for the opportunity to be on your channel, and we will do it again.
You must feel privileged. You're the first person to be on a live stream on my channel, and I thought it fitting because I was the first rebel of the VF Plus to come to talk on your channel, so I've got to pay back the favor. So yeah, to all the viewers that tuned in, thank you very much. The stream will obviously also be saved on my channel. You can watch that afterwards. Colyn's channel. I will put a link to Colyn's channel in the on a pinned comment under this video after the stream. So go check out his stuff. He's got interesting comments. This man's doesn't really either have a filter. He speaks his mind and he doesn't give a fuck what other people say. For that, I got a lot of respects.
Thank you, Liam. Have a great